Okay, ladies and gentlemen, last time we had a video, I'm going to go ahead and run it. We created a game that basically just had an idle animation. So no matter what we did with our buttons, he didn't walk right or anything like that. He just has this breathing pattern. Of course, if we jump or duck, it switches to the old images. But again, no walking right. We're off the ground. When we shoot, it just comes out from wherever. And that's pretty much it. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new animation for a a shooting animation. It's a little bit more complex. So I copy that private image and I go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and name these variables MISR for mech guy, idle, shooting right. You notice I'm using camel case, so my variable starts with a lowercase like it's supposed to, and then the next word in my abbreviation is capitalized, or next letter, so forth and so on. So that's a capital or lowercase m, capital I, lowercase s, capital R, and then I just go ahead and do a numerical following after that. So after I do that in my game screen class, I'm going to come over to my assets class, and I will go ahead and I'll make these public static images, and I will go ahead and I'll just comment these real quick so I know what they're for. They're for the mech guy idle, shooting right, so that I have a good note for that. So when I come back to my code a month later or whatever, it won't be so confusing. And I should add that note right here as well. And now I need to create an animation. So first I must declare it. Again, I'm going to stick with basically the same idea, MISR anim. So mech guy idle shooting right anim. And this will just be for him standing and shooting. And now I go to my loading screen class. I'm going to go ahead and copy this line right here. Give myself some space, and I'll just put a note here as well so I know exactly what this animation's for. It's for the idle shooting right mech guy. And when I go ahead and I paste that old code, I need to make sure that I put the exact correct name of my picture, which happens to be Jughead underscore idle underscore attack 0001. And then for the assets class, I need to make sure that I'm referring back to the variables that I made in the assets class. Now, this particular animation for me, I believe, has 6 images, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paste this 6 times, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to name the variables correctly, because the variables in the assets class are actually called MISR, MISR2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And as I go here, and I'm going to go ahead and change the names of the images so that they're correct. I notice I got a little bit of red over here, so chances are I must have messed something up when I named the classes in the assets. So let's take a look, and sure enough, I did. I didn't capitalize. It said it was camel backing, and right there I am camel backing. I have the capital R's and stuff like that, and I forgot to, even though I said it, I didn't put the capital R. So let me go ahead and change those back, or change those correctly to camel case. Got the capital R there. Save that, and I should probably check my, let's see, loading screen now has no errors. Okay, so the assets in the loading screen, no issues whatsoever. I loaded up the right images. Let me double check this, MIS random, okay. And then down here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to assign the same name variables, MISR, that are in this class, the game screen class. I'm going to assign them the value that's in the assets class. Now keep in mind the loading screen loads the files to the assets variables, and we just bring those over from the assets class and we load them to this one. A couple different ways to do it, but this is just the current way that we've been keeping it, so we'll go ahead and we'll leave it like this. And copy and paste that. I'll go ahead and I'll make sure I'm putting in the right numbers. Again, I see some errors on my left side there. So I'm going to assume that I messed up with the variable naming. Even though I said I wanted the camel case, I must have made that same mistake up here. And yep, sure enough, I sure did. I did not camel case the R's there. Again, every other word in a variable should go lower to uppercase, lower to uppercase. And since my abbreviation it has different words in it, you know, mech, idle, shoot, right, I'm going to go ahead and continue to camel case those as well. And then I'm going to go ahead, now that I've assigned those variables, I'm going to create a new animation. Now I've already declared it up top, but put a comment here so that I know exactly what this is for. And then I'm going to say my mech idle shoot random is a new animation. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to steal this little bit of code here, and I'm going to go ahead and assign each one of those frames so it knows exactly what image to show for those frames. Again, this one has 6 frames, so I got to make sure that I'm putting all 6 frames in. And I'm going to go ahead and copy this now that I have it, and I'm just going to go ahead and paste that for 5 and 6 here. And then I will quickly rename the image variables because I got 2, 3, 4, 5, oh, and 6. Okay, so now I have the animation book set up, but I'm going to Control F. I'm going to type in animate, and not this one, but here in the animate method, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make sure that I'm updating that new animation that I just created. So if you forget this step, it'll never flip through the animations. You might not even show the new image. So I'm going to go ahead and change the times to these. Now, I'm not going to get too much into the minutiae of why I'm changing the times for these. Suffice to say, the more time you add, like 50 is a small number, so that's going to be a quicker flip book, and then the longer numbers are going to show up for a little bit longer. I think once you see my animation, you'll kind of see why. I might end up tweaking those later in the future too. But now I'm going to the robot class, and I'm going to create a private Boolean. And I'm going to name it firing. Now I do this because I want to be able to see, am I firing, yes or no? Because if I fire, if I pull the trigger on my gun again, I want to make sure that I'm aware of that. Otherwise, my animation will be a little funky. This is for me so that I don't forget, or so that I can check it, so that I can restart my animation whenever I need to. You'll see why shortly. I'm also creating a getter and a setter for that Boolean that I just created. So set Boolean will be able to set it to true or false. So whenever I fire, I can say, hey, firing is true. And then getting, I can get it and say, hey, is this true or not? And you'll see why in my animations later, why I do that. So in the animation class, taking a look at these variables, frames tells me how many frames it has. Current frames will tell me how many frames the whole animation has. And so that kind of helps us figure out, cycling through my animations, when does it end? How many do I have till I repeat? And in my case, since I don't want this to repeat constantly, I'm going ahead and I'm putting in those getters and setters that I already did. And then I'm going to also do some getters here. I want to get current frame because with my 6 slide animation or my 6 tile animation, I want to know when I'm at a certain point in it so I can reset it. Now the cool thing about this is there's lots of animations I could use this on once I set up this framework here, because let's say I want to have a duck animation. I'll do that later on in the future too. I obviously don't want to duck and then stand back up and duck and stand back up when I'm holding down the down button. I want them to stay down. So this will help me not, when I'm done with all this will help me make sure that I'm not uncontrollably flipping through the animation, that I'm actually doing it with control. So this next method I'm going to create will allow us to set a specific frame. So again, when I go ahead and I shoot my rifle, I don't want my barrel to be up in the air and then I'm hitting fire again and then these bullets are coming from that mid-range level where the barrel normally was. So this will tell me, okay, which current frame am I on, and A is my animation over, and B, if I'm not on the frame that I want to be on, go back to that frame. So it'll kind of help me figure that out as we go. And then I'm going to create one more method. So I got the getter for the current frame, I got the setter for the current frame, so I can set the current frame. And then this one will allow me to physically reset that frame or the animation again, so that we can control when it resets or when it does not reset. And plus, we don't want to have this partial timing because as you saw, as I put like 50, 100, 200, if I don't reset the anim time, then what's going to happen is some of that time will still be sort of in the system, if you will, and it'll start counting from where I last left off. This way, I can go ahead and I can set anim time back to 0, and it'll start counting fresh for that new tile, so it'll give me the whole tile show. So we'll go ahead and we'll just set it to this.anim time equals t. And then we got to do some logic for it. So let's go ahead and scroll down in the game screen class. I'm going to look for updates because we're going to be now in the updates running method right here. So make sure you're in this one. And let's take a look. So right here is the buttons, so we can tell which button we're touching. As a matter of fact, let's go ahead and put some of our comments here. This if inbounds right here, that's actually for the jump button. And then this one right here is for the shooting button. And then this else if here will be if we're ducking. So those are the buttons that you see on the left side once we start it up. So those will tell us, those are the areas for those buttons. So if you ever wanted to move the buttons or add the buttons, this is a really good portion of the code to sort of look at so you can make those decisions later on or in the future. You notice that on the firing one, I set robot.setFiring to false. Okay, so make sure if you want this animated again, the reason why I have this is because I want to set that Boolean to false at that point because I'm hitting the button. I want it to make sure that it's false. And then I'll go ahead and I'll add this because once I do hit the button, robot.setFiring is false. And then I'll go ahead and I'll reset the animation for the idle shooting right animation to 0, the frame, and the anim time to 0 as well. And then under the robot.shoot, calling for it to shoot, I'll set the firing to true. This means, okay, let's start back at 0. Let's go ahead and run the shoot method, and now let's set firing to true because we are going to fire through the whole animation. Unless, of course, I hit the button again, which it'll start over. So we'll see. Now let's do the logic bit. If you look here, we have an if for the robot being jumped. We have an else if for the robot being idle. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change this or add a little bit more logic for firing. And this is going to be a little bit more complicated than any of the previous two that are up there. So I'm checking if the robot's moving left, if the robot's moving right, make sure both of those are false, and the robot is jumped is false. And let me clean that up a little bit. And then also if the robot's ducked is false. So if I'm not moving left, if I'm not moving right, if I'm not jumped and I'm not ducked, and we'll go ahead and we'll check the shooting. So if I'm doing all these things, and I'm really trying to be very specific, right? So if I am firing, if I'm not moving left, I'm not moving right, I'm not jumping, I'm not ducking, but I am firing, I must be wanting to shoot idle, right? So standing and shooting, basically. So I go ahead and I put this inside this next braces here. I'm going to go ahead and nest this if statement. And if my idle shoot animation, the current frame of that is less than or equal to 4, then the current sprite will equal the idle shooting right animation, and not get current frame here, but actually get current image. So this will make sure, okay, have you run through the whole animation? Because if you haven't, let's keep on showing the animation. And then, of course, if I have, it'll skip this and it won't show the animation anymore. So that way, that stops it from repeating. I shoot the button and it does it once. So if I want to duck and do something like this, I would do the same sort of if statement. I would say if, the current frame for my duck animation is at the end of the duck animation, and then it'll just run it the one time instead of repeat it. And then I say else, if it's not, then go ahead and set firing to false. And this will turn that Boolean back to false so that it can set my frames back to 0 again. Now, you might not set your frames back to 0 in this case. You might go ahead and set the frame to a specific image if you were ducking, like it was whatever animation's third frame, then you might leave it at the third frame. All right, so let's go ahead and run this and take a look at what we have here. So I'll go ahead and play it, and then if you see, I'm shooting, and if I rapid shoot, you'll see that it goes back to the flash point that's early in there. There's a little bit of smoke at the end if I let it run through this whole thing. Of course, if I up or down, it's still the old stuff. That hasn't changed. But now I have an animation where I can click the button one time, and it'll run through the whole thing, or I can rapidly click it, and you'll see that it resets back because I'm able to set that current frame back to 0. It resets it back to that point so that the animation doesn't repeat, but it does allow me to rapidly tick it if I want to. In this case, I would want to. So hopefully this helps you out with a little bit of shooting animation. I'll do a ducked one a little bit later so you can see it from a different sort of angle. But for right now, this one hopefully helps you out quite a bit, and you should be able to at least be firing with your animation and without any errors or anything like that.